Welcome back to In the Shop. Today we're learning about something every dealer has access to, but very few are truly maximizing: OEM co-op advertising dollars. For years, dealerships have left tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table because of complex rules, compliance headaches, and time constraints. But what if co-op wasn't just a paperwork burden? What if it was a predictable, scalable revenue driver? Today, I'm joined by Mark Baruth, CEO of COOPABLE, and Emily Gatewood, their senior manager of partnerships. They're helping dealers unlock untapped co-op funds. They're eliminating compliance friction, and they turn manufacturer dollars into measurable marketing ROI. And I can't wait to get into it. So welcome, Mark and Emily. How are you two?
We're doing great. Thanks for having us.
Oh, yeah, of course. We love making this content for the Ford and Lincoln dealers in the shop. It's one of the first times that a lot of these dealers get an opportunity to find out about you, who you are and what you do and how you might be helpful to them. So the first question I always like to start with every company that comes in the shop is, what is COOPABLE?
Yeah, so COOPABLE is the industry's only company that is dedicated to the optimization and utilization of co-op funds. And we started this business about 2 years ago because of exactly what you were saying, Sean, that there are dealerships out there who really struggle to manufacture the right amount of ROI out of their co-op. And it's not just because of the complexity of the programs, but it's also because of the choices that dealers have. It's also because of the difficulty in just getting everything done exactly the way that the manufacturers require it to be done. And every program is different. Ford and Lincoln are certainly no exception to that. And so what we've done is we've created a company that makes sure that dealerships effectively and efficiently use their co-op to maximize and get the best possible return on that investment and sell as many cars as they can, which is the general idea of being able to use co-op. So we really understood this because we evolved out of a marketing agency, and we were trying to help our clients use their co-op to the best possible ability. And we realized there was just nobody out there who was an expert, right? If you had questions, even the OEM reps sometimes didn't know the answers. And so we're like, somebody needs to be experts. So we didn't become experts ourselves right overnight. We went out and found experts, and we hired people who've been doing co-op at the dealership level for multiple brands for 10 to 15 to 20 years. And we brought them on board, and not only to help our clients, but also to teach us the ways to do this. So we've been really effective in that over the last couple of years, and we're now working with well over 400 dealerships across the country, several vendor partners, and of course here in the shop.
Well, it's a brilliant move. You take something that people loathe, they just don't want to do it, or they don't know how to do it, and you build a business, a valuable one around it, around something that no one else really has experience in and expertise in. So it's a smart move. Mark, I want to ask you, you've spent a lot of time, like years, in automotive journalism, writing for The Truth About Cars, Road and Track, and others, while also holding key roles at Cox and Automotive Mastermind, Ad Parents, others. I want to know what exact frustrations you saw across the experience with how dealerships handle co-op that convinced you to build COOPABLE instead of just maybe continuing the conversation about the problem.
Right. Yeah. I was really fortunate for a long time to write industry analysis articles for a lot of the magazines and publications that you mentioned. And one of the things that we saw was that dealerships are focused on so very many things that they have a hard time wrapping their heads around co-op on a daily basis. And we were seeing dealerships that were forfeiting tens of thousands of dollars, but also just misusing dollars. A lot of the dealerships that we were talking to were saying things like, well, we spend all of our co-op money, so we think we're doing okay. And I always tell the story. I'm like, I go to the grocery store and with $300, and I spend it all every single time. Now it's because I bought 300 boxes of Fruit Loops, but hey, my cabinet is full. I spent all my money, and dealerships kind of face that same thing. There's a lot of vendors out there who are coming into dealerships specifically just with the pitch, we are co-op eligible. We can be co-opt, or we are co-opable. And because of that, dealers are really just kind of signing up for stuff. They don't really understand how it works. They don't really understand what the return they're getting is. And they certainly don't understand always how much money that they have that they can leverage to pay for these things. So, Emily, you might want to talk about just, there's a couple of dealers we've seen where, they had X number of dollars and they were spending way more than that.
Yeah, we've definitely seen it where, say, they had a $50,000 co-op budget, but you're submitting 85 against that. So they're not always super aware of the fact that they're really, at the end of the month, writing a $35,000 check right out of pocket for services that they could be maybe not signed up for, right? That they have multiple services that are doing the exact same thing because the general manager signed up for something, marketing signed up for another thing, and they make it kind of confusing to verify exactly what you have and making sure you've signed up for just what you actually want to be billed for.
Interesting. I said it in the intro, dealerships on the regular leave tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in co-op money unclaimed every year. Are there, if there is, I'd love to know, are there is there a top 3 list of the real barriers that keep this happening year after year?
Sure. So let's look at some of those reasons. So if we're going to say top 3, number 1 is complexity. If you're a dealership, let's say you're a Ford or a Lincoln dealer and you're trying to figure this program out, that's one thing. And that can be complex in and of itself. And we're here to help with that. But most dealerships don't just have the one brand or the one store. Most of them have 5, 10, 15, 20 stores. And they may have as many as 5, 10, 15 different 20, OEMs that they're trying to work with. Each one of those programs presents its own set of challenges and complexities. And the vendors that are out there don't really respect that. So you'll see lots of vendors who are putting together what they call their quote unquote co-op packet, and they're sending the same documentation, the same invoice, the same receipts, the same proof, the same Excel spreadsheets for all of those OEMs, when in fact they probably only really apply to 1 or 2. So the dealerships are taking that packet because they don't know any better, and they're submitting it to all of their OEMs, and it's getting rejected or placed into missing document status by, let's say, 10 of the 15 OEMs because it doesn't really fit what that OEM is asking for. This creates a situation where something goes into missing documents and then it's never addressed, and then those funds expire. So I would say that can really be the number one, is complexity and the differences between the brands. The second thing that really causes it is the lack of understanding about what's eligible and what isn't. So we had a situation last year where there was an OEM who changed guidelines halfway through the year about what you could do as far as inventory listings go. So it used to be that this OEM would approve your Auto Traders and Car Gurus and Cars.com and Auto Navigators, and now they don't. That change was made just somewhere in the third paragraph of Section 2, page 76, and the dealers didn't catch it. So you had these dealers of this OEM, thousands of them submitting tens of thousands of dollars for things they thought were going to be approved. Turns out they're not, and there's no recourse at that point. So that change in the program, not really understanding what's eligible and what isn't, is really difficult to stay on top of that. And those changes do happen quarterly in some cases even monthly. There was one OEM last year that changed their program 3 times in the second half of the year last year. And it's really difficult to stay on top of. So the last thing I would say is that vendors just don't really understand their part in the whole thing. And that's why we work with so many vendors to help them get their documents ready, help them submit things correctly. I used to work for, like you mentioned, Automotive Mastermind, and I was responsible for putting the co-op documents together for my dealerships. I can personally tell you, I did it on the last day of the month, and I probably did a really bad job of it because it was like the last thing I had on my mind. If I was going out and trying to work with dealerships and help them use our tool and everything, co-op's just not on the top of the mind of vendors for sure, and that really makes it difficult. So there's nobody that they can raise their hand to and say, we need help. They're expected to be experts. The Mazda document is 126 pages long. Like, how are you going to know that? Like, that's like reading War and Peace because the font's like this big. So it's not just the dealers who are confused, it's the vendors. They're putting together products and then they're trying to shoehorn them into these guidelines. So I would say it's all 3 of those things, right? And we could probably make a list of 30, but those are the things that probably really impact dealers the most.
There is a top 3 list. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about co-op rules, audits, the reimbursement process, because you just said, number 1, it's notoriously complex. How does COOPABLE cut through that complexity so the dealers can scale these claims without constant rejection or compliance headaches?
Yeah. So what we're doing is we are trying to build a situation where dealerships can use whatever vendors they want without having to worry about, am I going to get reimbursed for this? It's difficult because a lot of the ways that the manufacturers have these programs structured isn't really designed for dealerships to get the best return on the investment. It's designed to get maximum compliance. So the way that a lot of these vendors who are in the programs are measured, they're not measured on how good is the advertising, how many cars are being sold. It's how well are you following the rules. And we don't think that helps any dealers. We don't think that really helps them sell a single car. So what we do is we cut through that mess and we say, okay, co-op is not super black and white. It's very gray. And there are areas where those dealers and those vendors and those OEMs can kind of come together and say, okay, here's the actual rule. What's the spirit of that rule? We never commit fraud. We never break rules. We never cause dealers to get a strike. But what we do is say, can we collaborate in the sense of what's the spirit of this rule and make sure that the manufacturers get what they want out of the program, the dealers are getting what they want out of the program, and then we're helping the dealer select the very best vendor for their stores. Not maybe the most recommended one, but definitely the very best vendor for their stores. And so in order to do that, you've got to curate a lot of materials, right? You've got to get the invoices correct. You've got to get maybe the right list of cars. You have to get the screenshots. You have to get scripts notarized. There's so very many things that go into that, and, if you're a quote unquote turnkey vendor, a lot of those restrictions don't apply to you. So you can kind of, just use your product and get through it. But if you really want to use the best one, there's so many requirements. COOPABLE helps with that. We get all that documentation together. We communicate with the vendor so that the dealer doesn't have to. If there's something missing, we go track it down. We go hunt it down. We go make sure that the claim has the necessary supporting documentation. So in that sense, we are making sure that the dealers never have to think about it. And I think that if a dealer's thinking about co-op or stressing about co-op, then we're not doing our jobs. Like, we should be handling that from A to Z. So that's the environment we try to create, is dealers, vendors, and OEMs all working together to get the best possible result for those co-op dollars.
I love that. You guys are definitely painfully aware of the fact that digital advertising, especially, the costs have been climbing. Performance been getting a lot harder to predict the last 10 years alone, but certainly coming out of COVID, Google's got to make its money. There's been a whole lot of increase, and I'm curious to know why, from your perspective, why has co-op marketing become one of the most powerful underused tools that dealers have right now in comparison to, say, the last 6 to 10 years?
I think the biggest difference is that as these ad costs continue to climb, you have to be able to kind of cut that cost somewhere without having to reduce its effectiveness in your business. So the goal with these co-op funds is really to kind of help eat some of that cost, but also help you market your cars in a way that you feel is effective. So as Mark mentioned, we work with vendors and dealers directly. The goal with that relationship is to really help the dealers pick the best vendor for their situation. Just because a vendor is turnkey doesn't mean that they're always the best solution and the best fit for you. And using those co-op dollars in the way that you think makes the most sense with you when it comes in terms of ROI for what you're getting on those, I think that's what those dollars are really designed for. And as those ad costs continue to climb, it's even more important.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, I think it's really important to understand. You mentioned the Google's going to make their money, right? Google's going to make their money. So many dealers look at advertising costs and they say, okay, I'm going to pay for these things out of my co-op funds, and then whatever's left, I'll pay for. We really have figured out that there's some cases where it's better to allocate your co-op dollars towards other things, and maybe pay for your search engine marketing or your search engine optimization or your social out of pocket, and really take some of those funds and get creative with them. Could you be doing an event sponsorship? Could you be doing a streaming audio or streaming video? Is there a billboard that sits right on top of your store that your competitor buys every month that you'd like to claim back? Those co-op dollars don't just have to go to the most traditional methodology. They can really be used in ways that dealerships can't even possibly imagine. And most of the OEM programs that exist out there, there's somewhere between 25 to 30 different categories of co-op funds. So don't just get locked into that, I got to pay for my SEM with co-op. There's other ways you can spend the money, and we're here to help dealerships figure that out.
I love that too. If you if you don't mind, if you're comfortable doing so, I would love it if you guys would share a clear success story, like a dealership that's underclaiming co-op. They start working with COOPABLE, and all of a sudden they're posting measurable gains in the kind of leads that they want, traffic, sales, and what were the changes that drove the improvement?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep their name out of it just because I don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable. But there's a very large group that we work with up in the New England area, and they had a really, Emily can speak to this too. When we talk to a group for the first time, if they say, we think we're doing really well with co-op, we don't think we need the help, that's almost assuredly the worst one. It's like the better somebody thinks they are at co-op, probably the worse they actually are at it. When we talk to somebody and they're like, we need help, it's actually normally not that bad. But these guys were like, yeah, we think we're okay, but if you want to come and take a look. They had several stores that had not submitted for co-op in over a year. And they had lost, an average of about $170,000 per location over the previous 12 months. And it wasn't a matter of anything other than just having 30 plus stores, 20 plus brands, and just really not being able to manage it in the way that they wanted. And so when they brought us on board, the first thing we did was say, okay, we're going to go back and we're going to do some cleanup. And it was amazing just going back. They had, as Emily mentioned earlier, they had several vendors doing the same thing, submitting for the same piece of co-op money. They had some claims that some vendor had come in and told them, this is eligible for co-op, and it never was. Vendors who claimed that they were submitting co-op on their behalf who weren't. And it was kind of a scary thing to see because, we really, I think all of us want to believe in the best intentions of our partners in this business, and unfortunately, sometimes that just wasn't the case here. So we went back and we said, okay, let's look at this. Let's document it out line by line, and we highlighted for every single dealership what they could have been submitting, what they should be submitting, where there was duplication in their vendors, where there was opportunity in categories that they weren't listing. So when we start with a business, we always do an initial kind of State of the Union audit. When we conducted this audit for the group, they were shocked. They were like, I cannot believe that this is the situation we're in. And we said, good news, we can help. So now this dealer group, they've acquired another 15 or so stores since this time, and they've been able to get off on the right foot right away with co-op in their new stores, and we're also able to go back and clean up their old stores to the point where now they haven't missed $1 of co-op spend in over a year. They're seeing incredible returns because if you think about it, NADA says that it costs about an average of $700 plus to sell a car, right? So if you're losing $170,000, there's 200, 300 cars you didn't sell in the past year, and their sales numbers reflect that. The marketing dollars reflect that. So they are now the number one brand location for most of their OEMs, for Ford, for Hyundai, for Kia, for Porsche, for Mercedes-Benz. Now they're the number one performing brand in almost all of their almost all of their OEMs in their region, and a lot of that can just be tracked back to better planning, better strategy. We meet with them every single Tuesday. We have a great call, and then we just we stay on top of it. And so I think that's been a real aha for us, was saying the more we can get involved, the more strategic we can get, the more we can help them select the actual tactics they have, the better everybody does.
So I want to move to something that's similar to what you were just sharing, Mark, which is, these programs often fail to deliver meaningful ROI to the dealership. And it's usually because they're trying to figure it out all themselves, similar to what you're just describing. Are there, and either one of you can answer or both, but are there some recurring issues that happen over and over and over when it's the dealer trying to manage it all on their own?
Yeah, gosh, Emily, yeah, I know you've been dealing with a lot of this lately. Maybe if you can pick up one of those.
I think kind of the most common recurring one is that they just don't have the time to dedicate to co-op enough to make sure that everything is done correctly. There are very few dealerships in this country that are able to have a full-time dedicated person to doing co-op. Mostly it's someone's job that they do on top of the millions of other jobs they do in that dealership. And things get missed when you're not able to dedicate the full focus that it requires there. So that's kind of the thing I've seen the most often lately. Mark, I'd love your input as well.
Yeah, I highly agree with that. It's unfortunate that most of the time when we talk to a dealership, they say, yeah, that's the BDC manager's job. That's the marketing director's job. We've seen the HR person doing co-op. We've seen the office manager doing co-op. We've seen people who really don't have a real expertise towards it. So what balls get dropped are things like missing documents. Okay, so when something gets submitted the first time and a manufacturer comes back and says, hey, we didn't get the right inventory listing for this, we don't have the right script, we don't have the right screenshots, that falls into a missing document status, and that almost never gets caught by a dealership, almost never. So then that just kind of, they typically have 10 business days to respond. You know how crazy a dealership's inbox is, right? If you're a general manager of a dealership, you're probably getting 1,000 emails a day. That one that gets stuck in the bottom that says, hey, you need to submit a screenshot for this claim, they're never going to see that. So that's, it's that attention to detail that can really drop. And then when we take over a dealership for the first time who's been trying to manage it themselves for a long time, what we find is that there's so many things they're doing that could be co-op eligible that they just don't know about. So we've had dealerships who are really struggling with events. That's one of the biggest things. Almost every dealership out there is sponsoring a little league team, or putting a car in a parade, or has a car parked at the mall. Things like that. They're not really able to reclaim those funds in the way that they could. We had a group down in Texas that we reclaimed an average of $35,000 per rooftop over just doing that, because just little things that they didn't understand. Hey, on paragraph 7 of page 12, section C, it says you can do this. They're just thinking of it as the very high level things, the standard SEM, social media, things that they think they should be paying for. So it's just the lack of attention to detail. And we always say if you rate yourself as a dealership, right, and we say you're between a 1 to 10 in co-op, how good are you? Most dealers will tell you they're about a 7 or an 8. Maybe sometimes a 6. We say for every 1 under 10 that you're probably losing $10,000 a month on average. So if you're an 8 out of 10, you're probably losing $20,000 a month. If you're a 9 out of 10, probably $10,000 a month. If you're a 5 out of 10, God help you, you're probably losing $50K a month. So just look at it that way. And the question I always ask dealerships is, who's auditing your auditor, right? They say, oh, well, Susie in the back does the co-op. Great. Who's double checking Susie? And typically it's nobody. And when that's the case, watch out, because Susie, might be doing a great job, but if she makes one mistake a year, it's probably going to cost you anywhere between $30,000 to $50,000. So let's, if you can get rid of those mistakes, you're going to save yourself a lot of money.
Well, let's future cast a little bit. What will dealership OEM co-op collaboration look like, say, in 5 years? Will AI, fancy automation rules, and better data finally fix the broken parts? Or do you guys think the same problems are going to persist?
Boy, we get asked this question a lot. And, there's some folks out there. There was a guy I saw on LinkedIn who's been proclaiming every month for the last 24 months that this is the month that AI becomes, is going to handle co-op. This is the month. Next quarter is the quarter that AI takes it over. And unfortunately, we just don't see that happening. And there's a lot of reasons for it. When we have a dealership who tells us they're using AI for co-op, we're like, I hope you have a good lawyer. Because, think about how all the mistakes AI makes when you just ask it like, hey, who won the Super Bowl for the last 10 years? And just things like that. Trying to interpret 150, 200 pages of co-op documentation with the gray areas that exist inside of it. AI is just not built for that right now. Even when we have AI read our own documents, it messes it up. So, maybe there will be a situation, a huge leap forward where AI is able to do this, but frankly, we don't see it coming. Because co-op at the end of the day is still a manual process, and it's a manual on every aspect of it. So it's a manual in the submissions, but it's also a manual in the review. I mean, Emily and I talk to the folks at some of these co-op desks daily. And it's the same 3 people. It's the same 4 people. And it's like, okay, hey, today, I hope I get Chad when I'm on chat because Chad's really good at this. And, Susie's not as good at this. And we know, like, if Susie answers the chat, you just close it out and reopen it and you hope you get Chad. Because it's still, it's crazy. It's incredibly manual on all sides. And oftentimes when we're submitting a claim, if Susie rejects it, we have to go and be like, hey, Chad approved this on Tuesday. Here's the reference number. You need to go look at it. Because there's so much that's available, room for interpretation. And I don't think that's a bad thing, right? I think it's like, if you sponsored, a local golf tournament and the rules say it has to be a sales event, how does AI know if a golf tournament is a sales event? It's only a sales event if you've got a salesperson standing at the first hole, handing out golf balls with the dealership's logo on and stuff like that. Like there's gray areas and additional things that need to be in there. So I don't think it'll ever get better from that perspective. The one thing I would hope that would get better is that the OEM programs are more respectful of emerging technology. Because what we see right now is that the OEM programs are about 5 years behind when it comes to using co-op dollars to pay for things that drive sales. And I'll give you an example of this. There's so many great AI tools out there right now that you can't pay for with co-op funds. If you have an AI chatbot on your website that's directing people towards inventory, probably not going to be co-op eligible. If you have an AI voice tool that's handling your phone calls and redirecting people to the right thing and cutting down those things, or that's not going to be eligible for co-op. A lot of the really cool, innovative vendors, they come up to us all the time and say, hey, I've got this great product. Can this be co-op approved? And unfortunately, 99% of the time, the answer is no, because the folks in these programs who are managing the programs are just a little bit behind the curve. So what we hope is that co-op evolves to include emerging technologies, better technologies, things that dealers are actually using inside their dealerships. I think Ford and FordDirect was one of the most pioneering companies when it came to this back in the early 2010s, when they started mandating that dealerships spend 50% of their money towards digital. And I remember that was a crazy thing, right? Dealerships were still buying the back page of the Miami Herald, they were still, putting up billboards everywhere. They're still putting ads on buses. They were still at the Auto Trader news magazine, or with the ads of the cars in it. And FordDirect was one of the first companies that really shifted people towards that. So I'm excited to see what FordDirect and the shop have going forward, because there's so many cool tools and companies in the shop right now that I'm hoping that a lot of that will evolve towards being, I would love it if Ford dealers and other dealers could pay for our services with co-op going forward, because I think, that's something that we'd love to see too. So yeah, that to me should be the biggest evolution, is recognizing that emerging tech.
It almost makes too much sense that co-opable would be co-opable.
Right? Wouldn't you think
Right.
that? But it's
Yeah.
it's tough.
I love that you shared about that perspective, Mark, because that's kind of been an Achilles heel with these programs for a long time, is just internally on the OEM side. Do they really have people who are staying on the bleeding edge is tough, right? You're gonna shed a few drops to be there. But if you wait for mass adoption, you're also gonna miss. And that is costly for a lot of people. Well, listen, we're almost at the end. And the last question, Emily, is really kind of for you, although you can both chime in on this. But as the person who is managing these partnerships at Co-opable, you're, of course, on the front lines, right? So you're taking bullets. And you're building these relationships with vendors, helping them navigate co-op reimbursement. What are these most common pain points that vendors bring up to you when they first engage with you guys? How do you typically address them to get buy-in quickly?
I think the biggest thing that we hear often is that it's very difficult for salespeople for a product that is not in program to deal with that. Well, are you co-op eligible, right? And if they're not super familiar with the different program rules, they don't know if maybe even though they are not in program, they could still be getting co-op reimbursement for their products. So the reason that Co-opable works so well with vendors is we not only help with that growth, we can also help with retention, right? Because to be honest, with a lot of dealers, the first things that go are the things that they have to sit there and write the check for versus what they can pay for out of co-op funds. So COOPABLE is really able to help with that growth and retention. And also just as you're developing new products, trying to see if what you are developing could potentially be co-op eligible as well. So we help vendors in all different sides. And ultimately that's helping the dealer too, because they get to work with great companies that they like to work with.
Makes way too much sense. Mark, Emily, this has been a very insightful conversation. I knew that it was going to be, but it did not disappoint in any regard. What stands out to me is that co-op dollars aren't a bonus. They're not optional. They're not paperwork. They're a strategic growth lever hiding in plain sight for the dealers. So I hope for all of you dealers that tune in and learn more about COOPABLE that you see that as clearly as I did in listening to Mark and Emily share. If dealers, if you are fighting these rising ad costs, which you are, shrinking margins, it's tough, right? It's always been up and down, and we're one of those verticals that seems to have strength that others don't. But you're dealing with so much unpredictable performance. The answers often may not be spending more. It may be capturing what's already available. And I think Mark and Emily did a really good job of articulating all of these points of value. So thanks again both for you guys joining us in the shop and helping dealers rethink how they approach OEM partnerships and marketing ROI. To everyone who listens and watches, if the conversation sparked an idea, share it with your team. If you don't already follow Mark and Emily on LinkedIn, I also highly encourage you to do that so you can get some of their sharp, spicy hot takes over there as well. They're absolutely worthy of you putting them into your network. And as always, stay focused and curious, and we'll see you next time right here in the shop.